Gravedigger, a Dave Brandstetter mystery, Book 6. Author, Joseph Hansen. Publisher, Open Road Integrated Media, New York. Narrator, Eric Aust. Chapter 12. Amanda said, "What in the world is this?" She stood at the door to the rear building, blinking in the light that came out. She wore corduroy jeans and 2 layers of sweaters and a stocking cap. She wore fleece-lined boots. "I thought you'd had a stroke or something." "Come in." Dave backed into the room and shut the door. When she was inside, "I only said it was an emergency." "It's an emergency. What do you want? Coffee or a drink?" "I want an explanation," she said. "Dave, it is 3 o'clock in the morning." "I know what time it is." Dave went down the room under the high rafter shadows and to the bar. He poured whiskey for them both. "Sit down," he called. "I don't know how soon this will be over. You might as well sit." She unwound her muffler and sat on the couch, facing the fire, building the fire. He had hurt the shoulder. The pain had been sharp, and he had fainted for a minute. He felt all right now, angry, but all right. He handed her a glass and went back for his own. "We are going to keep a vigil, you and I, for Cecil. I want you to be here when he is delivered out of the hands of his enemies." "What are you talking about?" She was angry, too. Dave told her, again, without permitting her to interrupt. Though she tried. He finished like this. "You told Miles what I'd said to you about the pictures, about us trying to get into bed with me, didn't you?" "That's how it is between us," she said sharply. "We don't keep secrets from each other." "Of course. I told him. It was so ridiculous." "So is this even more so? What do you know about Cecil?" "More than you know about Miles," Dave said. "What?" She laughed. There was no humor in the laugh. "Did he show you the photographs?" "How could he? They don't exist." "Ask Avram, the waiter at Max's," Dave said. "He'll tell you they exist. Miles wasn't with you tonight, was he? So how do you know where he was, what he was up to?" "I don't, but I'll believe him when he tells me." "He warned me not to tell you about our little encounter up there." Dave jerked his head to indicate the loft. "But he didn't say what he'd do if I told you." "I might have guessed. He'd do something mean-spirited. He's reckless, Amanda. Doesn't give a damn for anybody." "He got Cecil a wonderful job," she cried. "And look how Cecil has repaid that kindness." "He got Cecil that job to get Cecil out of the way here, so he could take Cecil's place in my bed. Not my affections. He doesn't know anything about affections. He thinks affections are contemptible. Don't marry him, Amanda." She hurled her glass into the fire. She stood up. "I will marry whom I please." Her voice was tight with rage. She turned and marched toward the door. It opened. Before she reached it, Cecil stood there in his corduroy car coat, looking stunned. "You!" Amanda shrilled at him. "You!" And she pushed him hard in the chest. He was a head taller, but she caught him by surprise. He sat down on the bricks. Abe Greenglass was a few paces behind him. Amanda, in the dark, bumped hard against him, spinning him around, sending his attaché case flying. He was a small, thin man. Amanda stalked away across the courtyard. The black shadow of the old oak swallowed her up. "Shit!" Cecil got to his feet, brushing his narrow little butt with his hands. He looked at Dave, big-eyed, aggrieved. "Welcome home, baby. I love you." "What's the matter with her?" "Edwards," Dave said. "Edwards is what is the matter with us all." He went to Cecil, hugged him with his good arm, put a kiss on his mouth. "Welcome home, baby. I love you." Abe Greenglass picked up his case and gently cleared his throat. You want to go out to this Edwards character?" His voice was like a whisper of dry leaves. "Come in, Abe, and thank you very much." The lawyer came in. Dave took his Homburg and hung it on one of the big brass hooks. He helped him out of his black overcoat with the astrakhan collar and hung that up too. "We all need a drink." He limped down the room to the bar. His shoulder yelled with pain. His hip felt as if it were grinding in its socket. "Take a seat in front of the fire there. Get warm." "I have to be in court early," Greenglass said, but he sat, leaned toward the blaze, rubbed his fine-boned hands. "What do you want me to do about Edwards?" "He's vicious, but he's not stupid." In the shadows beneath the loft overhang, Dave fumbled one-handed with whiskey ice glasses. His fingerprints won't be on the evidence. They won't be in the van. He'll have witnesses to account for his whereabouts. He disguised his voice on the phone, and I didn't record it, so there's no hope of a voice print. Going after him would be a waste of your time. What about the waste of my time? Cecil said. And that stinking jail. His voice shook. He headed for the bathroom, yanking out of his coat, slamming it down on the bottom steps. The bathroom light glared. Water splashed. He gargled angrily, spat angrily, blew his nose. Never get rid of the stink. He stood in the bright doorway, scrubbing his mouth on a towel. Redneck fools. If I stole stuff, would I steal it from where I live? Would I go to work with it in my car? He flung the towel away, snapped off the bathroom light, went to Dave. Here, let me do that. But the drinks were ready. He picked up 2 of the glasses and went with them to the couch. The fire, green glass. That man wrecked me, held me up to public ridicule. He handed the lawyer a glass. Those people I've been working with, you think they were going to let this thing go past? They were out there with cameras and microphones so fast, right on their doorstep, right in their parking lot. No way do I escape getting on the news in the morning. I'll stop it, Greenglass said. What's the channel? 3, Cecil said. I'll never get a job in television again. Cecil came into the firelight and dropped onto the couch. You didn't want a job in television, he said. Edwards wanted it for you. All right, but I didn't want it to end this way. Don't worry, Greenglass said gently. I'll put a lid on it. Put a lid on Edwards, too, Cecil said. Put him in the garbage can and put a lid on him. He's a lawyer. He could do things like this and still be a lawyer, can he? Stealing, framing somebody. Don't lawyers get disbarred for that? Not if it can't be proved, Dave said. Cecil stood between him and the fire. He stared. Aren't you even going to try to prove it? You mean he's too smart for you? You never lose. How come you're willing to lose when it comes to this? After what he did to me? I haven't lost. Dave looked up at him. I've won. We've won. He wanted to separate us. He used the television job to set that in motion. And it worked, didn't it? He waited. Grudgingly, Cecil mumbled that he guessed it had worked. Dave said, and then he moved in to try to take your place. He explained how Edwards had done that. Cecil squinted. What? Why didn't you tell me? It didn't mean anything. I didn't want you upset. Better upset than arrested, Cecil wailed. Right, I know that now. Doesn't help, does it? I'm sorry, and if you can't forgive me, I won't blame you. And Edwards will have won, after all. Ah, shit! Cecil sat down on the raised hearth. He glowered into his drink. You couldn't know what he'd do. Wasn't me he wanted to hurt anyway. It was you. I should have been gentler, rejecting him. Maybe it never happened to him before. Unhappily, what he assumed I was willing to do to you and Amanda for the pleasure of his naked company made me lose my temper. It wasn't that, Cecil said. You told Amanda, didn't you, after he warned you not to? She was going to marry him, Dave said. And she still is, isn't she? Cecil's smile was grim. He had her here tonight to show her what an alligator he is, and it didn't work, did it? Nothing seems to be working, Dave said bleakly. Speaking of working, Abe Greenglass said, I want to get the name of Channel 3's attorney. We should talk right away. He set his glass on the couch arm and went for his coat and hat. They won't want to show that film when they understand it was all a mistake. Dave raised his eyebrows at Cecil. All right? Thank you, Mr. Greenglass. Cecil sighed and got up from the hearth. But you sure there isn't some way for Edwards to be down in that jail like I was? Just for a few hours? Just to have to breathe that smell? Just to have them treat him like he was nothing? Something to step on and smear into the cement? I'll give it serious thought, Greenglass said. He was a servilous man. He shook their hands. He waited until he was outside in the cold night and the dark to put on his hat. They slept the day away. For Cecil, it wasn't easy. He kept moaning, waking, shifting position in the wide bed beside Dave. He twitched, kicked, talked. The talk sounded angry, though the words were never clear. For a while he lay sprawled on his back, and when he did that, he snored. When the snores got loud enough, they woke him, and he mumbled and shifted position again. About dawn, he shouted and struck out. His flung fist caught Dave in the ribs and reminded him that they were still tender. Dave shook Cecil, woke him, and Cecil clung to him and wept. But when daylight came, exhaustion finally took the boy, and lying on his face, limp as the dead, he slept, which allowed Dave to sleep. Dave crept from the bed at 2:30, showered awkwardly, clutching the hurt arm against himself, trying not to move it, which was tricky without the sling. He got into fresh clothes, which was even trickier. He went to the cook shack and set slowly and carefully about fixing a casserole. When it was in the oven, he poured a mug of coffee and started with it for the back building, meaning to waken Cecil gently. Give him a space of time before eating. He was stopped, crossing the bricks under the arbor where the tips of new green leaves were showing on the dry brown vine, stopped by a loud, painful scrape of metal out on the road. He set the mug on the bench under the live oak and went to see what had made the sound. It was the Jaguar from the Beverly Hills showroom. In all the excitement, if that was the right word for it, he had forgotten the delivery had been promised for today from the hospital. He'd had his accountant draw a certified check that Cecil had taken to the dealer. A white-haired black in a crisp brown jumpsuit with the dealer's name stitched across its back, bent to unfasten from the rear bumper of the car a three-wheeled motorcycle. He dropped the chain into the carrier of the motorcycle, dropped the lid, and saw Dave. His face lit up as if they'd discovered each other in some hostile alien land after a long forced separation. Dave had never seen him before. He came forward, pulling a fold of papers from a breast pocket. "Mr. Brandstetter." "Good to see you, sir." "I brought your car." "Beautiful." He held the papers out for Dave to take, who took them. The man in the jumpsuit said suddenly, very serious, "But you're going to have to do something about that driveway. Otherwise, you're going to rip her guts out. And that would be a shame." Clumsily, Dave flattened the papers against the doors of Cecil's van. "Do I sign these?" The man in the jumpsuit found a pen and marked an X on the top sheet. "Right there, please. Here, let me hold them for you. Shame about your accident. Pretty little car. Sound like you were lucky. Burned up," Mr. Lowe said. He held the papers while Dave signed them. He put the pen away, handed Dave the white copy of the papers, folded the colored copies into his pocket, and the big loving smile was back as he laid the keys to the Jaguar in Dave's hand. "I hope you had better luck with this one." He stroked the Jaguar's sleek brown gold finish. As he passed it, he straddled the motorcycle, kicked the motor softly to life. It was very quiet, as befitted a motorcycle delivering $30,000 automobiles from Beverly Hills. "Anything you want to know about the car is in the manual. It's in the glove compartment." He separated the syllables carefully. "Have any trouble, just call us." "Thank you," and Dave said. "And don't have bad dreams about the driveway. I'll get it fixed right away." "This is good." Cecil mopped his plate with French bread. "Wonderful. But you could hurt yourself here. You know where the most accidents happen, at home, in the kitchen. And you only have one arm." "You needed your sleep," Dave said, and drank wine. "Sleep like I had," Cecil said grimly. "Nobody needs. I'm sorry about that. Kept you awake, didn't I? Acted like a little child can't wipe his own nose." "My fault," Dave said. "Don't you apologize. I just hope the nightmares go away soon." "None of it would have happened if I'd told you what Edward was doing. I weighed telling you. I didn't because I thought it would spoil the job for you, and you were liking the job. You were proud of it. I didn't want you thinking you didn't deserve the job." "I wouldn't think that. It doesn't matter why he did it. I was fine on the job." He looked gloomy. "But I'm not going back there. The way those people acted. Black, white, brown. All of them. Nobody is anything to them except a news beat. Don't bleed in the barnyard, you know. Other chickens will peck you to death. Try not to think about it, Dave said. Cecil took the empty plates to the sink. I wish you'd think of how to put the bastard in jail. Come on, Dave said, and rose. I've got something to show you that will cheer you up. He left the cook shack, and Cecil came trailing after him, frowning, hands shoved deep in pockets, gait slow and moody and without bounce. But he brightened when he saw the Jaguar. He walked around it, wide-eyed, awed. His mouth shaped a voiceless, "Oh, sheet!" He grinned at Dave, grinned at the car. "Look at that! Wowee!" He opened the door with great gentleness and respect. His hands moved over the seats, the dashboard. "Real wood," he whispered. "Real leather." He shut his eyes and breathed in deeply, wrinkling his nose. "And doesn't it smell beautiful?" He pulled out of the car, faced Dave, eyes begging. "You can't drive, not with one arm." "Can I drive? Can we go for a ride?" "I thought you'd never ask," Dave said. They drove a long way up the canyon and around back streets. It was sunset when they reached the upper end of Horseshoe Trail. The engine of the Jaguar made hardly a sound. Its ride was smooth and easy. Remembering the jouncy little Triumph, Dave smiled contentment. "Don't you go chasing Westover in this car," Cecil said. "Don't care how comfortable a coffin it would make." "I'm letting him come to me," Dave said, and told Cecil about Lovejoy and the letter. "He won't come," Cecil said. "But if he does, you make sure I am with you, up on the loft, hiding with a gun pointed at his head." "What gun? You know I won't have guns around." "It wasn't a gun almost killed you," Cecil said. "It was a car. I nearly pass out every time I think about it." "It was a 1958 green and white Impala," Dave said, and told him about the gas station boy's call. "What is going on with Charles Westover?" Cecil said. Dave said, "Wait a minute. Slow down. Stop." Horseshoe Trail had no sidewalks, no curbs, only a shallow cement ditch to carry off rainwater. A brown and white sheriff's car, a row of red, yellow, white lights across its roof, was empty and still, with one front wheel in the ditch, beside a mailbox and a driveway that meant that back in the trees and brush a house was concealed. The name of the mailbox was Vosper. Cecil halted the Jaguar, and Dave climbed out of it. "What's going on?" Cecil said. "I forgot to tell you. Salazar." Dave limped up the driveway, which was carpeted in pine needles, the house screened by dark deodars and lop-limbed cedars, was sided in raw shingles, like his own house, but was newer and two-storied. Cecil came running up behind Dave. The little shaggy brown dog came yapping toward him from the house. In the doorway of the house stood Hilda Vosper, talking to a young man in a tan sheriff's uniform. The dog hopped at Dave, happy, ears flapping like fur butterfly wings. Dave bent and ruffled the ears. The dog ran in a circle of delight, barking. "Why, Mr. Brandstetter," Hilda Vosper called. "We were just talking about you. You had a robbery." The deputy held out his hands. "Hopkins," he said. Dave shook Hopkins' hand. The little dog was facing Hopkins, barking up and at him and kicking its furry hind paws. Hopkins crouched to play with the dog. He looked up at Dave. "You've got a witness here." "Always talk to people with dogs." "Have to walk a dog, see what's going on in the neighborhood." "What was going on?" Dave stared at Hilda Vosper. She wore a checked flannel shirt, black and white and warm, looking gray flannel slacks. "What'd you see?" "I didn't realize what I was seeing." She gave a little apologetic laugh. "A young man, tall and slim." She smiled at Cecil. "I thought it was you. It was your van. The doors were open, television sets, loudspeakers, all that kind of thing, were stacked up in the yard, and he was loading them into the van." "It wasn't me," Cecil said. "Oh, yes, I realize that now, but it was after dark. It must have been 7 o'clock. I only saw him against the lighted windows of the house. But you don't have a beard and a mustache." "Also, I am not white," Cecil said. "But it was your van, wasn't it?" she asked anxiously. "Stolen," Cecil said, "to get me into trouble." Hopkins got to his feet. "Description mean anything to you?" he asked Cecil. Cecil opened his mouth to answer, but Dave interrupted. He asked Hilda Vosper, "Do you think you could identify the man if you saw him again?" "Well, I thought it was this young man just moving some things out of the house," she said. "But yes, I believe I could. I think I'd recognize him. Now that I see you," she said to Cecil, "there isn't much resemblance. You're stronger, your shoulders are broader. I remember thinking that he was wearing very beautiful clothes to be doing heavy work in. Of course," she gave a little embarrassed laugh. "I didn't stare. I just glanced into the yard and passed right on down the trail. Teddy was off the leash, and he'd run after a gopher or a mole or something. I thought he might have dashed down into your yard." "You taken a lot at a glance," Hopkins said. "I paint a little," she said. "It teaches you to see." Hopkins looked at Cecil. "You know who it was, don't you?" "You know, too, Mr. Brandstetter." Dave let Cecil tell Hopkins who it was. Cecil would get satisfaction from it. Cecil said, "He's a lawyer. His name is Miles Edwards. But you won't find the stuff he stole. When you find him, I've got it back." Hopkins looked puzzled. "What was it? Some kind of practical joke?" "Do you see me laughing?" Cecil said. Gay Mysteries audiobooks. I think it is easy to hate a label, but a face humanizes the word. So this effort is twofold: to offer comfort to those like myself that your world didn't end because you don't fit into the view of acceptable society on both sides, and in hopes of helping those with family that are LGBTQ, that it doesn't mean we are aliens from the child they once knew. Reassure them so they can maybe be supportive at the same time, being true to their values.